Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jewelers Academy podcast. My name is Kim Thompson, and this week I'm excited to be talking to Natalie Watson from Erinna Jewellery. Natalie creates jewellery inspired by Greek mythology using recycled metals and ethical gems, and she's passionate about offering size and disability inclusive jewellery. Welcome, Natalie. It's nice to see you.
Hello.
Brilliant. How are you? You okay?
Yes, I'm good, thank you. How are
Lovely.
you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Right, I've got a few questions for you, if that's okay. So, first up, I was hoping you could let our listeners know what sparked your interest in jewelry making.
Yeah. So I've always loved jewelry. I think just going to my nana's jewelry box with her, and one would always just wear jewelry, and it wouldn't matter like who owned it, how much. She just had it for sentimental reasons. My other had a really lovely jewelry box, so we go through that. Um, to be honest, in terms of making it, I think when I was a teenager, it was like one of those things when my parents were trying to encourage me and my sister to like find a hobby or find something we wanted to do. And I have a career in HR, so I've been in HR for just over 10 years. But I think I just got to a point a couple of years ago where I just thought, like deep down, do I want to be doing this until probably gonna have to retire at like 90 at this rate? So do I want to still be doing this until that day? I realized I wanted to do something a little bit more with it. And just I think I've like deep down I've always wanted to work for myself. I've always wanted to do something creative. And then the Jewelers Academy, like the fact that they had gone online just made it so much more accessible. And
You signed up to the Silver Diploma when you basically didn't have any previous experience apart from your soldering iron when you were little. And obviously, it's an intensive course. It's not the cheapest thing in the world. Um, but you just took that leap. So, what made you take that leap and sort of go full throttle into it? And how did you find not only doing that in general when the techniques were new to you, but also the remote learning rather than being in a classroom environment?
um, I mean, actually, I think so. In terms of remote learning, to be fair, I've actually probably been a bit used to it because I did some HR qualifications that way, like even really before COVID, like that was becoming quite normal. In terms of taking the leap, so I think to be honest, like I have to be kind of honest and acknowledge that I've had some privilege in my life. So I had some inheritance money that enabled me to pay for the course and invest in a lot of equipment because one of those things like I just I guess just want to be honest in that sense because not everyone is in that position. I don't want anyone to ever feel bad because it's maybe that's a blocker for them. But I think as well, kind of getting to that point in my life and thinking actually, okay, I could put that money away forever and it could sit and do its little thing, or actually I could invest it into something that even if when I first started, I was kind of like, it might just become a really expensive hobby. But I think, like I said, I've always had that interest. And I think just to think I can learn how to make these things and I can make really amazing Christmas presents or birthday presents or myself, like really cool things. Um, so that was one of kind of the things I think I just got to point even now, like, we only live once, or like at least in this life, like I'd I'd rather sit and regret doing what I've done instead of not what I've done and like, be that cool old lady in a care home with a really cool jewelry box who ran a jewelry business once.
But then
Maybe,
even that,
had something.
it goes full circle to your initial inspiration of going through those
Yeah.
family jewelry boxes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It was like, I'd be there with like my like thunderbolt lightning, like signet ring, like, you know, and just telling everyone my little stories. But I think the fact so that Jewelers Academy is online because obviously like now being a bit more involved in that and looking at the time, obviously the biggest courses seem to be like London or Birmingham, which are
Mhm.
obviously the bigger kind of jewelry hubs. Um, but like I say, Jewelers Academy just made it so much more accessible.
Yeah,
I
I
think,
think that's the key word, isn't it? It really is.
and like that you can do it from your kitchen table. Like I said, I think to be fair, I decided to invest in a little jeweler's bench because I had the space and also we have two cats who I just don't trust to be around, like who I couldn't shut out the kitchen and who just wouldn't leave me alone. Like one of them still sits at the door occasionally, or I'm in there like meowing to come in, bless him. But I think as well, like I was in a good mindset to like be gentle with myself and my learning. Like I think probably like everyone kind of during COVID, you just learn a lot about yourself. And like I say, I think I was just ready. Um, and then obviously I signed up for the course, and so it was about March time. And then I think, like I said, the next hour or the next day, I signed up. I think I'd seen you obviously, so I would sit there and like kind of actually thrill being on this podcast really because I remember when we were like painting, we had some downstairs cupboards put in underneath under our stairs, and like I remember painting. I was like listening to all the podcasts and everything, and all the guests and all the glitters like BBC program like that had been on. I was just like trying to immerse myself in so much of it when I then decided like to enroll, and then think I knew your name and obviously you're local to Bristol as well. So then I booked on to like I think a ring in a day or like a half day course with you to learn the basics so that I could. I was like mostly so I could learn not to like burn my house down.
I think literally the email inquiry. No, I think you put your booking in straight away, but in the little additional information that you'd written, I've just signed up for the Jewelers Academy Silver Diploma. I want to check I'm not going to burn the curtains down. It's like
Exactly.
perfect, we're fine.
I think my boyfriend was probably quite happy about that. Oh, actually, I did drop my rolling mill cracked on my final flooring, but we got that repaired. That's good.
Good.
That's an extra.
As long as it wasn't
But
your foot.
so obviously, yeah, so I signed up for the silver diploma. And then I did actually request that you were my mentor just because we had that session. But I know they can't guarantee it, but I was just obviously very lucky to have you. And like, as much as it's remote, it's not fully remote in that you do see the pieces, like you're seeing them as a tutor in real life and you're giving that feedback and you're obviously examining them and like I say it's not then when we have the calls with you, you guys have the piece still in front of you. Um and so it's as much as it's kind of remote learning, it is still really useful, like someone's actually giving you, really useful, like helpful feedback on an actual piece. And that's kind of I think going back to my mindset of just being more gentle with myself. Like, it's the amount of times you think you've made one piece and like fine, I've been lucky that some have come out fine first time. But then, I know if I make it again it's gonna be even better. So it's about that, I think. But I think as well, obviously, one of the things Jewelers Academy can't really do is just cover like every single way of doing something. And there are lots of
Yeah,
alternative ways.
that's the thing, nobody can. And that's what a lot of new learners and a lot of new smiths um, initially really struggle to grasp that. But what I'm always saying is all it takes is one tiny, tiny little fundamental to change, and then that affects everything. And like you say, there's no way you can preempt and go over every little thing and every little change and every different tool that somebody might be using, which is why the mistakes are so important, because the only way you learn that stuff is through doing and
Mhm.
trial and error. And as long as you can keep reflecting back on the fundamentals, then the hope would be that you are able to figure out that stuff for yourself and start to build that knowledge base. With the Silver Diploma, because it is so intensive and it covers so many different techniques, do you remember what your favorite technique was?
I think because right, to be honest, really it's probably all of them because
Mm.
in a way, because you're just learning, you learn all of the basics and like that little bit more because obviously you touched on a little bit on Keambu and I'd never heard of that technique before. Um, so that I wouldn't say that's like a basic, but obviously you're doing your sawing and soldering, and the wax carving because I would already dabbled a little bit, and I also did a local um like an evening wax carving course as well. And so I figured out I quite liked that, but I think you can't think, maybe if you're a hobbyist and you wanted to just do some wax carving, okay, you can do that, find a casters and get it. But, you can pay them to clean it up for you, but because otherwise it's, you're gonna get it back as this piece with all the skin on it, and you're not and a sprue, and you're not gonna know what to do with it. But or, if it's like cracks a little bit, or you need to resize it or something, like you've got all of those basics. And like the same with clay, because obviously it touches a little bit on silver clay, um, which again I think the diploma was just so good in terms of before I signed on, I'd seen about lost wax, like that was the first time I'd really seen about it, and even metal clay, and I was like, wow, this opens up so many possibilities to making jewelry. Because I've definitely fallen into like it's a really obviously it's a specialist area, but like this really, specialist, like inaccessible thing, like that I'm never going to be able to do. That actually you can, as much as I am doing more traditional techniques and lost wax, which is actually like a really ancient technique, um, it that and silver clay just makes it
Yeah,
more
yeah.
accessible to.
Which it's a double-edged sword, because that's also why they can never, nobody can ever cover everything, because it is so unbelievably broad, the jewelry making industry, and the amount of things that you can do. But equally, that's what makes it so inclusive, because like you say, in terms of mentality or learning style or dexterity, or whether or not you have a disability or what your budget is, there's so many avenues you can go down. But it's having that exposure to it, or like with the Silver Diploma in term three, having those taster sessions to give you a feel of what sparks interest. Out of all the techniques, what was the one that you found most challenging? Do you remember?
Think it's kind of funny because I was looking back at like the course, like the dates and what we did. But the one because the things I just remembered straight away were box, just because it's so big, I think. And I think also I was really looking forward to it. I was like, yeah, I've made this box, like, it'll be fine. Um, but yeah, I just remember like it got stuck, the lid got stuck, and I was like pouring olive oil onto it, like bang it. It did come off and it was fine. But I just think all the angles and everything for it. And I remember the collet setting as well. I think because obviously we'd done some stone setting, like we did some tube and bezel setting. But obviously it's just that like thicker bezel. I
Mm,
think that those are kind of what stuck out for me.
yeah,
Um, but
that's
then I
what.
was also looking at like the drawings.
Oh yeah, the drawings.
I don't know
I'm
if
in
that
awe of
counts.
anyone who can do orthographic drawing. It's definitely not it's not my street. But one of the things I always say to people, certainly about the Silver Diploma, where I find some of the most value comes from the fact that they have structured it in a way that really makes sense in terms of building your skills. So if you come back to saying, yes, you found the box most, one of the hardest, and you struggled a little bit with it because it is a very complex project. But in term one, you did the cylinder, which is almost like the intro to the
Yeah.
box. And exactly like you said just now, yes, collets are harder because the metal tends to be thicker. It's splaying out at a much wider angle. You're physically having to push and move that metal further to get it over the stone, all while trying to keep it even and get your sizing right. But again, the way the projects were laid out, you started with your bezels, which is an intro of how to push the metal, and then that went on to tubing, where you're having to cut your seat, and then that went on to the collets. Because what I find is, I think it's amazing in this day and age that we have all this access to YouTube and all the books, and you can order things in the library. And I don't think there's ever been a time previously where we have access to so much free information. But what can be
Mm.
really, really tricky is knowing whether or not what you're watching is at the right level, and
Mm.
whether you have the right tools to do that specific thing. So that logical structure, I really think, helps, even when things can still be tricky,
Yeah. And
because
like
they
you say,
are. Like, mm,
yeah, and like because like you said, it's quite fun to see. Like you said, when you're doing the box, yeah, that's why we did the cylinder in the first one, and you learn all those little things. And even like now in the fine diploma, like doing the box class and stuff like that, like you can see how it links in. But and again, it's just a taster, and I think for me, even like all of it, even if I don't. and to make it again. Like, I just find it really fascinating to learn how these things are made. Like, when we're doing the little box, I was like, "Oh, okay." You get the little click. Or, like, I just did I know I'm talking about the fine diploma now, but 'cause it's so recent, but I did the Creole earring. You're just like, "Oh, it's all just tension." So I was
Yeah.
like, "How do you make that little thing?" You know, it's like, "Oh, it's just a piece of wire," but it's the way you do, like, I just love it, like, and, like, the
So
tennis bracelet, but, like, just seeing how it's made.
that would suggest that you're now recognizing the fact that yes, things become more complex and more intricate and fiddlier. And you've got to build up your dexterity skills and have good eyesight or, put stuff in place for that.
Mm,
But actually the very, very basics, they don't change. So every project, you're really just doing what you did in term one of the Silver Diploma, because that's where the core learning is. And the rest of it is, like I say, it's just more of the fiddly stuff or figuring out what's the easiest way to hold something or support something or, building muscle memory. Um, but that's the bit that just becomes, repetition and practice more than learning of the fundamental skills.
mm. And I think because, like you said, when you think about the clay and the wax, like, I really like wax, but then I don't mind clay, but like, I have a friend who makes amazing jewelry. Like, she'll make like female bodies and put like out in clay, and I'm like, "God, just about, make a little hummingbird in a mold without like, well, definitely like snapped its head off a few times, but like, do you know what I mean? It's like that's just not my medium, but it's just nice to know it exists and it's there, and it's, if someone kind of interested in it, you have that conversation. It's like, well, a little bit about it, but
Yeah.
it's not
And
really.
also, like I say, it's picking and choosing where to focus your efforts because something that I find really fiddly, but I'm more than happy to do, I might look at somebody else and they're doing something and I think, well, I'd never do that because it's far too fiddly. But they would maybe look at me and think, well, I'd never do that because it's far too fiddly. And it's just different personalities and different ways of working. And the more experience you get, the more you can weigh up was when is it something where it's worth persevering and it's something that you either think is important to learn or you're really interested in it. And when do you just say, actually, no, like you said, that's just not my thing
Mm,
because there's so many things. You've got more than enough on your plate to be worrying about being able to do all of the things, which is what a lot of jewelers end up doing.
mm.
And talking about having enough on your plate, that probably leads us into the next question. Because when you were doing your silver diploma, I think you were literally at the halfway point and you launched your jewelry business. So you've gone from basically no previous experience to throwing yourself into a really intensive course to halfway through that intensive course launching this business. And when you launched it, it seemed fully formed as well, which I just couldn't get my head around how on earth you'd had the time, especially when you were working on top of that
Mm,
at full time at that point. I think you were still working full time. um, and especially, like I say, so many makers, jewelers in particular, we're really prone to procrastination. We're really prone to perfectionism. Um, so what I wanted to know is when you launched and it appeared so fully formed, was that because you had behind the scenes been meticulously thinking and planning, or had you made the choice to purposely not overthink things so that you could just get it up and online?
I think it was a bit of both, really,
Yeah.
because, like, to be honest, actually, when I signed up for the Jewelers Academy um, diploma, because it did talk obviously in there about there was help, there was a unit about launching a business. Um, so I did go into it thinking, because like I said, I'd always had this um, deep down, like, I do want to do this myself. And like I say, and you kind of start thinking, okay, well, what skills can I do um, to be self-employed? Like, well, obviously, I have a lot of HR experience, but it's not, I like it, and I do like the element of helping people because I am a nice HR person. I promise. It gets a bad rep, but but I don't know. I'm not sure if everyone would agree, but I think I am. But anyway, but I just remember um thinking, like, like I said, if it didn't work out, it could be more. It might just end up being more of an expensive hobby kind of thing. But I did want to just give it a go because they just kind of thinking, at least I tried, and like I say, That thing of, at least I'll learn how to make all these really cool things and really understand it. And it definitely gives me much more of a general appreciation for just handmade crafts. I think maybe going off tangent a bit, but like I think jewelry can easily like we can charge more for silver and gold. But when you have artists, like crochet and things like that, like
Hmm.
that takes about, it can take the same amount of time or more to put hours into this work, but people perceive materials as cheap, so they don't want to pay for it. Whereas, at least with kind of precious metals, we people understand it more. So it just gave me that much more appreciation. But just in terms of going back to the question, I think I've probably been thinking about it since that point, and when it kind of just got to doing it, I just took like Jewelers Academy 5 to just start, and like because waiting, because I don't know if I am a perfectionist, but I can fall into those tendencies. But like to be honest, for me, it will just never be perfect. So why hold myself back? Because I mean, as much as it would be amazing to launch on the first day and like be a really successful brand, like that's just not going to happen overnight. Like you're going to build it and build it, and I've learned so much along the way. And I think some things that you learn, you just will not learn until you've done it and you're in that situation. Um, so I signed up as well. So I signed up for the membership, Jewelry Academy membership, and I was doing the boot camp as well. So that was like nice little
On
prompts
top of
and help.
when you were doing the Silver Diploma.
I think I was just like, I'm just gonna go for it. Like you only live once, just
I
do it.
swear you don't sleep. Everyone always says that they think that there's two of me somewhere
Mm.
because it gets so much done. But you sort of, I feel
I'll
like
say
the
as
tortoise,
well, to be fair, we don't have children. I just have two cats and a boyfriend. I wrote like the cats
I
like
like the
heaven.
order that they were listed in.
I did, I still put a lot of thought. Like I said, I think I was just thinking about it over those 2 years,
Mm.
and because it kind of goes into like one of the things, when I started. So obviously, my jewelry is inspired by Greek mythology, but it didn't fully start that way. Like I started with a collection, so I just had a Greek mythology collection. But then I think I just found that I was wanting to add more and more to it, and maybe experiment with different styles. But um, then I was like, well, but what would that collection be called? And actually, but kind of, I thought about it because I heard this story and all that kind of stuff. So, and then I realized actually, I do some like plainer kind of stacking rings, um, like those kind of styles, and I was just calling them, like a beaded silver stacker ring. And I was like, actually, like, it's kind of nice when things have a name, I think, because, but I like it when they have a name that is actually really connected. Because like I do, so I've got an Aphrodite sea foam, so it's like loads of granulation bits. 'Cause for me, when I I was doing it as like a mindfulness thing, and I thought, oh, that reminds me of sea foam, and then like Aphrodite's like birth story,
Mhm.
um, being born upon the sea foam, and I've seen pieces and I was just named Aphrodite, and you're just like, why? Like, where does that come from? Like, I think when you say, oh, it's got this specific stone that was used to worship her and all of that, like, I love that sort of thing. And I just thought, actually, I want to connect that to my pieces. So I think, I mean, to be honest, like some bits, because I have a leopard print, I do some leopard print bits. I was like, oh, I just love leopard print though. I'm gonna keep that. But then there's so much like Greek mythology. This is just what I don't want to like go off talking about too much. I just love it, but they just have a god for like almost everything. As long as it kind of like existed in that time, there's like a god for it. So I was then like, okay, who's the Greek god of leopard print? And I'd be like, oh, Dionysus, the god of like partying and wine, and he'd ride on big leopards and big cats, and he'd have a chariot pulled by panthers and leopards, and he'd wear leopard print, and like, and I was like, there we go. Like, to be fair, some of them I might make, and then I'll think of the name, or a lot of stuff, to be honest, is flowing around in my head in terms of the things that are inspired. I want to make this style because of this story or whatever. But um, that's when I kind of decided actually maybe my whole brand, and also going back to like the origin of the name. So Erinna Jewellery. So my middle name is Erin, And for me, the nurse sounded like Natalie. So I was originally looking at Erinna, which would have been one N. And I was like, is there, if I do it with two N's, is that Erinna? Like, I typed it into Google to see if that's how you pronounce it. And then Erinna was actually an ancient Greek poet, but not a lot of her work survived. So I was like, oh, perfect. Like, I've got a Greek mythology collection, I love it. Like, I'll go with Erinna. And then I was like, actually, it just kind of, if I name everything and like, if I continue with the kind of inspiration of things around like Greek mythology and like kind of the ancient world, like it fits in really nicely with the name as well. And it's a nice little story to
I
tell.
think earlier when we were talking about why did you decide to go from zero to, full force in your jewelry journey, and you said, well, things just tend to align. If there's something was meant to be and you had that initial spark back in the day, even if you didn't pursue it at that point, things quite often come back around and you get another chance. And what you've just said about, the name and the coincidences, it reminds me of that, but it also reminds me of what they say about when you're decorating your house, that if you actually just choose pieces that you really love, they will work
Mm.
together. There's always a way of tying things together if those things are true to you in
Yeah.
some respect. Um, and yeah, like I say, everything that you've made, in some ways, you look at things and there's like very, very delicate things and there's very, very chunky things, but you've managed to tie them
Mm.
together. Um, Unless sometimes when it was just slightly more random things, because I found you in John Lewis selling your diploma work from the Silver Diploma first term in amongst
It's
everything.
my one-off.
So you want to
Those are the one-offs that are only available in person.
Um, so almost a year to the day after launching your jewelry business, you were selling your jewelry in John Lewis as part of the Great Brand Exchange. And when you started your journey making jewelry, I presume you had absolutely no idea that you would be selling your work in a major retailer in such a tiny space of time. Um, so it's just, did you have plan when you signed up? Like you've mentioned before that you thought at the very least maybe it will be a new hobby, but when you decided to launch your business on Instagram, did you have an aim to be at a certain level by a certain time point, or were you just
I think not really. Like I think it was a bit of both. As in, like, I mean, I'm a bit impatient. Like, I love everything now, but at the same time, I'm also really grateful for things that have taken time because, like I said, it took me because I think obviously I launched like end of or mid February, and then I think I didn't really make. I decided to do the whole like Greek mythology theme. Everything was like near kind of July time, so obviously that was a good few months. Um, but again, it's just kind of having that time and like so maybe covering some of the previous question we talked about, obviously brand and stuff. It is that thing of like I put a lot of thought into the psychology of things. And like the name and like when I was deciding about the Greek mythology, for example, I was a bit like, I'd love it like if someone's, wearing one of my pieces and that all compliments it. And someone's like, oh, thanks. It's from this like small business and all her stuff is inspired by Greek mythology and it's all named after that. Like, like this is the Zeus ring or like Aphrodite. Like I just thought I really liked the idea of that. So I think sometimes like my aims are more like that. Or just to see people wearing my jewelry, to be honest, in real life, like uh, is really amazing. So I think in terms of when I started, I think I would be in like John Lewis. I didn't really think as much about it, but I think if you like would go back, like a year ago and tell me that, I would probably not believe you. Um, but obviously, uh, the Great Brand Exchange is a really good way. Like I know they've done podcasts towards Academy before, but they are about getting smaller brands into those bigger retail spaces. So, I think I wouldn't physically be able because part of the thing that I love is making the jewelry like all handmade. Like I don't want to be going down the manufacturing route or anything. Like the only way it could really end up, I think, in somewhere like John Lewis was going to be through something like that. Um, but
how
I
did you
think
find out about them? How did you apply?
I think um I think I follow the Design Trust on Instagram, and I think they post about them, so I just started following them. Um, and then I think so you had to go on a call. I think just like a lot of things, so they explain it to you, so you know, make sure that you're the right person. Obviously, I think like things like MLM and stuff, like probably the right kind of organization. So it's just making like a bit of a screening, like a group thing, and then you can apply. And obviously, there's an application. But even at that point, I think I'd left it for a little bit because obviously it's a week, like it's 7 days, and it is just me, in my business. Like I do have friends that I'm so grateful for that help me, and like family, but it's a lot to ask people, and a lot to do yourself. But I remember I just kind of put it off for a bit, and I think I applied maybe just around Christmas time. So I don't even know if actually Bristol John Lewis was an option at one point, and I think I remember seeing it was now an option. So I applied for that in Cardiff, and then yeah, so it wasn't long. I think it was just at the end of January or maybe January. I think I was off work, yeah, on Christmas leave. Um, that they emailed and like, "You've been approved." Like, oh my god,
It was
is this
quite a
a
quick
scam? Is
turnaround. Yeah. But
like, is
between
this
you,
a scam?
that's a very short period of time between you applying and you
Mm,
actually physically being stood there. It wasn't not a lot of time for you to prepare.
no, I think well, it was funny that so there were 3 dates. So it was that so there was about 6 weeks. Um, and there was I think the week after, and then a couple of weeks later in like March. And I remember it's so funny. My first thought was like, "Oh, I'm not gonna do the first date. Like, give myself as much time as possible." I was like, actually, hold on. Like, I've got 6 weeks. I had a bit of, quite a bit of stock from other fairs and things like that. Because, like, like sod law, every time I make ring sizes, I never make the right ones for craft fairs. Like, they always have to order like their size to send out another time. Um, and I'd been working on a few other things anyway. I was like, actually, no, I do have, I've got enough time to make some bits. I like getting, especially like even if they're underweight pieces, like but a bit chunkier, like I like getting them hallmark. I was like, I've got enough time. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot.
Do you find that hard deadline helps? Because I know with me it
Yeah,
does. It's almost like the longer I have, I will still start preparing
yeah,
the same distance away. I'll leave it till nearer the time before.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think it did, and I think to be honest, during that time though, I did decide actually I would relax some of my hallmarking. So like on like bigger earrings, I only send one away, so it's on one of them, and like the little ones, like I bought little stamp, which you just can't underestimate, how hard it is to actually stamp. Just a
Mm.
little 95 on like inside a little ring or something. But I did, I relaxed a few things like that generally, which I think has helped because again, it's just all this learning over time. Like you think you kind of, I think it's obviously always really good you have your values you start with because one of the things, even just as like a jewelry lover and buyer, like I, you know, you do this whole thing of, oh, gold jewelry, like this gold plated, but oh, the plating doesn't last very long. I'm like, why is it making my finger go green? And like, I'd started learning a lot about that anyway. And I think I had decided, okay, actually now, if I remember going to like craft fairs and looking at stalls and like, right, is it sterling silver though? Or is it, it's silver, it's silver. It's like, is it sterling silver though? It's like, oh no, it's plated. It's like, okay, well, I'm not even going to bother kind of thing because that's just where I got to. Like, I would rather, and like with gold, like I wear a few more gold pieces now and will invest in a few more because for me it's just worth that. Like I would rather save that money and invest in a piece of gold jewelry that is going to stay gold for like my entire lifetime and more instead of on a piece that I really love wearing every day and then it wears off for a few months.
But I think because you've quite a while supported small businesses, it comes back to that ethos of you buy less of something that you
Yeah.
really like rather than, you like you say, you choose something and you invest in it rather than what some people do is you buy a lot of stuff or you change your stuff up with the changing seasons and the fashion trends.
Mm.
But it's at a lower price point and it's not always going to last that long.
But that and like because that kind of comes back to like one of my like values as well in terms of like I won't do. plated pieces, and I don't work with like the base metals. And it's like it's not a judgment of people who do or people who buy it. It's just the only thing that annoys me is like businesses that will say like it's waterproof, it's tarnish proof because it's not.
Yes, if anybody wants to follow you on social media, I always enjoy seeing your posts of all metal is waterproof.
I'm
But
like,
I know
but it's
that,
saturated water. Like
yeah,
it's waterproof. You mean tarnish proof, but it's not unless you know.
yeah. But I think that comes back to as well, because you were saying that as a buyer, as a customer, you would go and look at people's work and you knew that you wanted to buy sterling silver, but actually a huge proportion of people just don't have a clue. The awareness isn't there, and that's mostly our fault as makers for not educating the general public well enough. But people don't understand the difference between silver plated or sterling silver or fine silver. Even people who've been making jewelry for a while quite often
Yeah.
don't actually know the difference because again we're maybe not educating well enough with that sort of thing.
Mm.
So it's very easy for slick marketing companies that have had a good budget to make people think that they're getting something really premium when it's not
Mm.
necessarily. And we
Yeah.
see
Or
that all
like
the time with the high-end designers, and actually they're using the
yeah.
cheapest. It's all plated and glass or plastic or
Yeah.
yeah,
Thinking like is that again it's just my kind of value of like, I want you to buy something. Like I don't really do patina. And it's like again, it's not that I don't like it, but I just don't want you to have a piece of jewelry that you have to like upkeep apart from because obviously silver will tarnish. Like sterling silver tarnishes a bit quicker and gold can still tarnish. So it always needs a bit of looking after, but you can easily do that at home with a polishing cloth. Or fine, if it's really scuffed, you might need to send it for proper polish. But if you have things like the plating and stuff like that, like it's I don't I won't say expensive, but it's a cost. It's just an extra cost if you want it to be replated and everything. So um it's I think going back to kind of what I was saying, I think, knowing all your values in that sense and like the hallmarking was important to me, but I had the time to really consider actually, what is it? And actually like I want a chunkier piece, like my signet rings or something. Like no, as much as they can be underweight, because actually I was thinking, to be fair, a bigger size may actually end up going over the weight, but I still want it to just have hallmark and it has my mark as well. And I
yeah,
think this was kind of going back to my like realization of like, do I want to be in HR until I'm like 90? And am I really gonna impact? I'm not, am I gonna I'm not saying everyone has to leave something in on the world, but at the same time, like, things like I don't have children, we don't plan on having children and things like that. Like I was like, for me, it's like I'm gonna have a hallmark that it's gonna be on pieces that it's gonna outlive me, which is a really cool, maybe a bit morbid thing to think about, but it's like mine and it's that proof that it's me. And like on my ring for the silver diploma we did like the gold wedding band, like I got my hallmark put on the outside because I was like, what do I do? Like I don't want it just plain, but like, oh, I have my hallmark. And then I've always like got it there as a little thing. um but yeah, so I think in terms of thinking about selling in like John Lewis and all of that, I think sometimes it's also just about applying, um you know like maybe it's kind of some of my HR like thinking, but everything is an opportunity for feedback. And okay, you don't always get feedback really specifically from markets and places, but sometimes it's just nice. Like I said, when I just, like I don't know if I can do a whole week, like if that's even actually physically possible for me and everything. But if I apply and I'm approved, like I know that I'm approved and, like John Lewis would have me if I wanted, or if they don't, and like other fairs, it is a balance I think between not taking it personally because obviously it's not always actually just even down to you or your brand about why you're not approved for something, but just seeing what's it's like job applications though, like just apply for it, like you can always reject
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Like if you
And
if you don't want to do it,
the
the
same
door's
with
in
job
your court.
applications as well, is like you said, quite often if you're not approved for something, it doesn't necessarily mean it's that they don't like your jewelry. But if your jewelry does not meet the spec of that venue, or
Mm,
if that venue already has somebody in place that's offering the same sort of price point and style, then they might not take you on. And it's almost like with job applications, you need to read the criteria. You need to go and do your market research and think, okay, what really are they looking for? And do I meet that spec?
Mm.
And then apply. But even then, it's still a numbers game more often than not.
Yeah,
Um,
like it's such
and
a balance between
yeah,
like, oh yeah, I've been approved, but then also like, oh my God, I'm not good enough. But it's not like it's not necessarily that.
no. Oh gosh, no. Especially with jewelry, because I do find when it's mixed arts and crafts venue, more often than not, jewelry is one of the most oversubscribed
Mm,
in terms of people applying.
yeah.
So the competition is higher, and as soon as they've met their quota for jewelers, it doesn't matter how great your jewelry is, you're not getting in for that show because they're set. And like you said, it's about not taking that personally, but equally learning and then
Mm,
maybe spending more time researching events or try again next year or whatever the case may be with that.
mm,
So you're currently enrolled on the fine jewelry diploma, and as someone who when I think of you, I think wax carving, chunkier signet style rings. um that on first glance seems a world away from fine jewelry skills, small teeny tiny things, prongs, really um fine level stuff where it's all about the accuracy. So why did you sign up for it? And how do you think those skills are going to inform your jewelry range and your skills moving forwards?
mm. Like, I think it's quite funny, really, how dainty and like chunky and stuff get. Like, it obviously means different things to different people. Because I think, like, when I was at John Lewis or I've been at fairs, I definitely have comments like, "Oh, it's a bit too dainty for me," or "Too chunky for me." I'm like, I don't know what one it is, but because I do think sometimes it's a bit in the middle. But before, I think I preferred quite dainty pieces. But then now that I make it, like, I personally just prefer a bit more of a sturdier piece because if you're, looking in terms of like investing in a gold piece, um, it's just for that longevity. Like, it can't, the really tiny, tiny, dainty bits and like like the really pretty like gemstones, obviously actually maybe aren't actually suitable for daily wear. But then in terms of incorporating it going forward, I think I again, it's kind of what I love about my Greek mythology theme as well. I can do quite a lot with it because, like, I mean, like I was saying before, like you have gods and goddesses of like all these different things. So, like, um, there's like I just love it when like Apollo is like god of the sun and music, and he has a lyre, but he's also god of the plague. Like all these like random things, or like Hephaestus, like he's like the god of like metalsmithing and crafting, and like he would make jewelry, but he's also the god of volcanoes. Like I just love that. So it gives me a lot to play with, and I think just experiment because at the moment as well, like I'm trying to go down. Obviously, I'm conscious of like not I don't wanna get bored of something, um, and, like, I probably will always end up doing Zeus, and I think at the moment, like, uh, he is my bestseller, he's, like, the most popular, and I just love, like, when I do my little mirror polish on him and I can see my little face in the thunderbolt, like, I'm not getting tired of it yet. I don't know if I ever will kind of thing, but it just gives me a lot more variety in that sense, and I think, because like, to be honest, I've got so many ideas just floating around in my head. But I just think I do need to learn a few more skills to be able to to be able to create those pieces.
But
Um,
really, really builds your fine motor skills and your eye for
yeah,
detail. No matter what style you end up making, those skills are going to be invaluable.
yeah. And I think to be fair, I remember you gave me some feedback, I think the Silver Diploma, and you said I seem to be quite good at doing the little fiddly thing. I think I do. I, it's such a weird thing, like making jewelry in terms of like, I think I love everything about it, but it can be really frustrating. Oh my god, especially when you've got the tiniest piece and you're really trying to hold it and you can't just get it at what like the right angle. Or you need to, like, go in and be, "Oh, I've missed out on, like, the polishing," and, like, it can be a bit frustrating, but, like, the satisfaction you get from doing it, like, I think even recently I've made a few pieces, um, I'm just like, what so we did, like, the Creole hoop earrings and things like that. like a signet ring I did recently that's like a similar shaped one that my granddad like had as his wedding ring. I'm like, so weird sometimes to like see that I can actually make jewelry now that like, I would have bought years ago, or my family member, like just this kind of traditional style. Um, but I
That's
think
all I was going to say, thinking about the Creole earrings, because you've
mm,
now done more and more sort of hinge type um, mechanisms. And in your bio on your Instagram, you talk about being disability inclusive. And just at a really basic level, you think how many people have arthritis and their knuckles
mm,
swell. Having the skills to make a hinge, so you could maybe make a hinged ring for somebody, especially if it was a slightly heavier ring band, 'cause that's when the sizing is more crucial and
yeah,
it's less likely to go over a knuckle. So again, I can really see how those skills would come in their own for you to meet your aims and objectives.
yeah. And that's
Yeah.
the thing, and like, like I think at the moment when if I talk to some people, they've kind of asked about it. Like, I think there's so many little techniques. But there's just so many ways of working with someone, and it's kind of that, the size inclusivity for me as well. Like, I'm still kind of figuring out, especially some of the bigger, the wax pieces and stuff, like how much I can stretch them. But like with some of them, I can't remake them. Then if I need to remake it to be able to make it into a smaller size or a bigger size, like I'll do it, because everyone deserves to wear jewelry that they love. Like everyone, like why should you just be excluded? And like it's so funny when people, so I do like measuring, finger sizes, and you're like, oh, my really big finger, my sausage finger. It's like they're literally, it's like millimeters different. And like it's so crazy. And like for me, like there's just no judgment. Like, sausage fingers are welcome here. Like it's okay. But and like wrist sizes and things like that. I'm like, again, yeah, because if you really struggle with smaller bracelet, like to find them in your size, why should you go without having them? And it's a shame in a way that, obviously if that person is more likely to try and buy a cheaper piece, it's kind of a shame that you have to go to, your only option is a handmade maker, but at least it's there as an option. And like you said, I think hinges and because I'm not able to do that with rings and everything at the moment. But yeah, exactly. It's just building towards that aim of it, because, like we said, jewelry is just so sentimental as well. Like it has, I just like it just has so many meanings. Like um, just who wore it before. Like even I have a ring. It was my nan's. It was 9 carat gold, and it was my granddad got it for her on their 50th wedding anniversary because it's gold. And it's all like I think well, I took it to you because I want to like resile. I just sized it down a tiny bit, but it was going to be really hard to because it's engraved on the inside. It's got a little twist design. It's got this engraved pattern around the edge, and it does kind of fit like my biggest finger, but like, I don't really want to wear it on that. But like, actually, do you know what? I'm not going to mess around with it, because when I'm older and my fingers get a bit chubbier, it will fit me then, and I can still wear it. I'm not going to have to then think, oh, I need to, I need it sized up or whatever now. And I just think, why wouldn't we, if we can do it, why wouldn't we, so that someone can wear, that piece that their mum used to wear like every day. And yeah, I'm a bit of a tangent now, but
No, it's really important to a lot of people as well. And like you say, it's a nice connection to the past. It's
mm,
always the thing that always I find really interesting is that some people would never buy a secondhand wedding ring or engagement ring
mm,
because of the story and the legacy and what they're worried about. So almost like
yeah,
because of the connected energy to that piece. Whereas other people absolutely love the idea of a vintage or an antique or something that has a
mm.
previous life and a previous story. What would you like to achieve with your jewelry in the future? Because honestly, you've achieved so much in such a short space of time. My thinking is that your achievement should be to have a little nap, but I'm presuming that that's not going to be, knowing you, that's not what it's going to be.
I mean, I am actually, well, I think, so I work part time in HR still, but like I would love to go full time with my business one day. I think just to keep creating, and I think just it's really easy to feel like you're always, you just always have so much to do. And I think sometimes I feel like, oh, if I was full time, I'd be able to do it all. Like I actually wouldn't. I
Mm-mm.
know that's
No. No.
That's not a thing. You're just
No.
always catching up. But it would be nice to just have that, just that, like it's the whole thing of working for yourself, and just that freedom and
Mm.
just being in that world because I just really love it. I do want to get better at like stone setting because I just want to add a bit more color into my work as well. And obviously get those designs that are like floating in my head into real life. And then hopefully just like getting stocked in some shops, that kind of stuff. It's so much to learn just from everything. So like even just the jewelry making itself. Like we said, saying there's so many things. I just think so many little aims because like I do really love stone setting as well. So I think I do want to like get even better and learn new techniques. Because like obviously we're going to be doing star setting in the fine diploma the next term. I've already done a little bit, but I love that style.
It would really
Um,
suit your work and your ethos as well. Yeah.
yeah, I've already got an art collection in mind as well. But yeah, exactly. So I just that's kind of one of my biggest aims. But I think because it takes that time to perfect, like even now, I think like claw settings and stuff like that, like still need to practice it more. I think this is one of the struggles with going straight on to the fine diploma is obviously that I remember like got like, all this summertime, like I'm gonna do so much, like practice, blah, 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 and it just didn't really happen. Um, and
Yeah, it's
even
keeping the
now,
momentum. When you're in learning mode, it's easier
exactly,
to learn, and when you're out of learning mode, it's a lot harder, isn't it?
yeah, because that's what I was thinking, when I finish, because I don't plan to do the advanced one because I do want to just give myself that time.
Mm.
But like things like we're going to be doing filigree, and at the moment I can't see it incorporating as much into my work, but it's just nice to know that I'm gonna learn it. I'm gonna figure out if I like it or not. And then if I do, but don't end up touching it for a bit, I can always come back to it as another thing to like top up and just keep interested. But
Yeah.
the
Well,
same with like business. There's just so much to learn.
weirdly, one of my in-person students who normally makes big, showcase
Mm,
pieces, large scale, large stones, a lot of work in copper. She's this term gone down a whole filigree rabbit hole, and it's the last thing you would expect from her,
yeah,
but she's
yeah,
managed to tie the two together, and she's really enjoying it. So sometimes like that's the great thing about the diplomas is you do get to try lots of little areas, and sometimes it's the things that you presume wouldn't be your thing actually
yeah,
ends up really, sparking your imagination.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Um,
With the sheer amount you have learnt over the last, what is it, year and a half, maybe?
yeah.
It's not a long time period. What would can't word now. Um, can you give our listeners and watchers your top three tips? So it could be anything to do with, what you've learned over this period.
I think so. Like the first one is just like mindset. It's just everything, and like you have to work having that positive mindset, but also like coping strategies because like it is really hard. And like we said, there's just things that you just can't take. Like you're gonna take them personally as soon as it happens. But one thing with that is I would say don't show up on things like social media to kind of moan about it or like,
Mm,
because people don't want to see that, but find a trusted group or a friend or something to confide in. Like there are loads, there's obviously Jewelers Academy, but there's loads of other business groups and business mentors and stuff and places like that you can kind of do that in and have those extra people because also like for me, I don't really have anyone close to me who before obviously all of this who owns a business so I didn't really have anyone. But obviously finding through Jewelers Academy, like, I've met loads of amazing people even just online, has really helped. My second one is then having patience with yourself. So it might be a bit more of a mindset thing, but just kind of whatever area, like when you're learning. So, you know, just because the soldering on one piece went perfectly one time doesn't mean it's always going to go that way. And when it doesn't, like, just don't don't have this, like, oh, I was really good at it that time. Now I can't do it. Like, I know sometimes we kind of need to we do just need to take, step away get a cup of tea, something like that, because just
Yeah,
just
that's the
don't,
key. And like you said, it's completely fine to let off steam and go, ah,
mm,
walk away or have a cup of tea or, for that moment think, oh, I can't do it. But the really, really important bit is, like you said, then taking that moment to reflect and actually pick backwards and figure
mm,
out specifically what is not going right. Because then that's when you're learning. Whereas so many people, it is that black and white thing. It's like either I'm amazing or I'm rubbish.
mm,
There's nothing in
exactly.
between.
I think as well, like it's kind of again the trusting, like because like when it comes to again making, you are developing that muscle memory. Like even now, I'll see it sometimes when I'm working with a piece. I'm like, oh, like you're gonna do something, and you're like, oh, that went like really well. Whereas before, it might have been a bit like, oh, like took a little chunk out or something.
Yeah.
Just kind of with that as well, like yeah, and when it comes to like business and like build, like it takes just time to build everything, and actually, we realize really as much as I think, you know, you see lots of businesses thriving or they've like gone viral on social media or something. It's like, actually that's not actually going to be something that I ever really want, because I'm not going to, if you're a lot of us, if we're all handmade, if our business went viral, it just wouldn't be able to cope.
No, it's like you
Um,
said about your presumptions with John Lewis. It's like you wouldn't think you would be there because the presumption would be to be there, you would have to be church, you would have to mass produce.
yeah, exactly. But again, then it kind of goes back to your values, and that for me, it's like at the moment, it's me making it. If you're buying a piece, like as much as I will have molds of like wax pieces made, but it will be me that is polishing it still. Like I still made the original, just obviously saves a lot of time and cost when you have molds done, but it's still me like completely polishing it up and everything with that. So
Um, you do see it a lot where people actively share to support your friends and family who have small businesses. You don't need to buy their stuff, but sharing a word about them, word of mouth, liking a post,
mm,
leaving a comment, it really can make a big difference. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And like
Yeah.
you said, I think when you say, in terms of John Lewis and people not always realizing, like, um, I think as well, it's just a reminder, yeah, like, you feel like you do have to be annoying on social media. Like people don't, the amount of times I think I've said, or I've made it clear, like I work in gold as well. I just don't have everything currently, available to buy straight away. Like I still like, oh, do you work in gold as well? Like if I
Yeah.
then post about someone else who's like been following me, they're like, oh,
Yeah.
you work in gold. I'm like, yeah, but like they just don't, or even just I think the marketing like John Lewis that is so good for like the craft, just the questions, because I like in terms of just doing it in person, I can't always have a bit of a script or an introduction now. And, and it's like it's handmade by me. Like I'm the actual maker. I think that most times it's like, oh wow, like, and um I mean obviously it also depends where you are, but especially in like just fairs where there's a bit of a mixture um of those kind of, if it's handmade, obviously if it's like all specifically gonna be handmade, then you probably don't really need to say that. But even if it's just, but it's me, it's like me, I'm here in front of you. um, and like we say, just a reminder, like it's sterling silver, all these things that are important to people. Like I've learned as well, obviously weight is quite an important thing. Um, which again I just have never really thought of before. I would have just taken it for granted, really.
But also,
Um,
like you say, just because you know you're repeating it, so therefore in your
mm,
head you think you're being annoying or you're bombarding people, but most people don't see it. You know, even people who avidly follow you, they're not going to see all the posts. And most people only see, maybe one out of, 10 or 20. Exactly. And with that in mind, where can our listeners find you online and find out about new stuff coming up?
yeah, so I have a website, so erinnajewellery.com. And I have Instagram, like we mostly active on there. I'm trying with TikTok, kind of have Facebook and Pinterest as well. I'm
Brilliant. And we'll put all those details in the show notes as well. So if anybody wants to have a little look at the bottom, you'll be able to click direct links and then you can find Natalie over on her pages. Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on today, Natalie. Thank you for talking to me. It was really lovely to see you. I'll see you
Bye.
later. Bye.